Estamos aquí en las oficinas de la Cámara de Comercio agradeciéndoles mucho este espacio que nos dan para un medio alternativo, étnico en la ciudad. Hoy tengo el placer de estar con dos mujeres remarkable, muy inteligentes, latinas las dos. Estamos en la ciudad de Filadelfia. Tengo a Farah Jiménez, quien es además la CEO de una organización que es Philadelphia Education Fund. Y tengo a Sabrina Burbulias, que es periodista independiente, que ha hecho un trabajo maravilloso de periodismo aquí en la ciudad, periodismo latino, periodismo americano. Y yo creo que yo esta vez voy a descansar porque las dos tienen, las dos son periodistas en realidad. Farah está en un programa en este momento, así que yo hoy voy a descansar, yo las voy a dejar hablar a ellas. ¿El cafecito cómo está?
Muy bien.
Muy bien, ok, bienvenidas. Cámara está aquí, micrófono está aquí. Comienzo con Farah. Farah, ¿cuál es el programa en el que estás haciendo parte? Además vamos a ir entre inglés y español como siempre. Entonces, Farah, bienvenida. ¿Y cuál es el programa en el que estás participando, el programa de radio?
¿De radio o televisión?
Oh, es de televisión.
Sí,
Okay.
sí, sí.
No, sí.
Se llama Inside Story y está en 6 ABC. And the show is a public affairs show, so much like the news shows on Sunday on television, this one, instead of it being about national issues, we focus on what are the local issues that people want to know about in terms of politics or issues of the day. So in the past, we've had things like talking about the Starbucks incident that happened in Philadelphia, or we talk about the governor and the Senate elections as well.
Sabrina, tú estás en este momento como periodista independiente, estás trabajando hasta donde yo sé para el Guardian. ¿Cómo ha sido este trabajo de periodismo?
I'm pretty much a occasional columnist for a number of different places. Depending on my interest, it's been great to work with some of the organizations. I did a piece for PRI about how jarana has become the sound of immigration protests here in the States, and that was a lot of fun to do. And of course I write commentary. It's great. I mean, it's interesting to get a real global, una perspectiva mundial, because you write for something like The Guardian, and your reaction isn't only coming from Philadelphia or even from the United States. It's from all over, and immigration is an issue for everybody. It's not just a U.S. Concern, obviously, and
¿Estás enfocado sobre todo en inmigración?
En parte, por lo general, cuando escribo comentarios es acerca de inmigración o acerca del votante latino.
Sí.
Cuando escribo acerca de, por ejemplo, el perfil que hice de los jaraneros en Filadelfia, entonces sí hay gente que son inmigrantes, pero no todos son inmigrantes.
¿Dijiste jaraneros?
Jaraneros.
Para, ¿tú sabes qué es jaraneros? No.
Jaraneros son ya sean los cantantes, los músicos o los danzantes de son jarocho, y tocan y el nombre viene de la jarana, que es una guitarrita, de tamaño, it's a ukulele size. Aunque hay varios de diferentes tamaños, pero por lo general la que ve uno es bien chiquitita. Y es una música del área de Veracruz, de ahí origina. Entonces tiene raíces indígenas, raíces africanas y también raíces árabes y españolas, y es un tipo de música muy interesante.
Farah, tú tienes origen cubano,
Sí.
¿verdad?
Sí, sí.
A mí me encanta que Farah cuente esta historia siempre, porque tú tienes, bueno, a las personas que están conectadas, y además quiero decirles que está conectada Jenny Toro, Ángel Medina está conectado desde Puerto Rico. Ángel, bienvenidísimo. Está Ángeles Durante, María Angelita Hope. Farah, fue parte de la Comisión de Educación de la ciudad, hizo un trabajo maravilloso, era la parte, digamos, latina, o yo siempre lo sentí así en la Comisión de Educación. No es un trabajo fácil.
No.
¿Cuántos años fueron?
4.
4 años.
And thankless, right?
Sí, y no te pagan, mucha gente piensa que te pagan, pero
Exacto, es un trabajo voluntario.
voluntario.
Gracias a la fundación que podrías hacer ese trabajo. Ahora cambió la comisión de educación, ya se disolvió esa comisión y hay un grupo distinto que está puesto por el alcalde de la ciudad, ¿verdad?
Solamente por el alcalde.
Solamente. ¿Cuál sería el cambio? What do you think is the biggest change in this type of different groups that are advisor group in education?
So the reason there was a movement for the change is in the past it was the School Reform Commission, which is what I served on, was a commission formed by the state to take over the governance and the management of the School District of Philadelphia. So 3 of us were appointed by the governor and 2 were appointed by the mayor. So that suggests that the state really had the most control because 3 of us were appointed by the governor. What was unique about the model is that even though we were appointed by the governor and even though 2 were appointed by the mayor, we were given 5 full years as a term, regardless of whether or not our mayor or our governor were reelected.
Mm-hmm.
And what that allowed is for us to take very difficult votes that were unpopular and to be distant from the governor and the mayor in making those decisions. So at times, even if we were doing things that they really wanted us to do but that were unpopular, they could point a finger and say, these awful people, I don't understand why they're doing that. And they had political cover. The new model, because advocates moved for it, and the mayor decided he agreed, the new model is to appoint 9 to 13 people to serve on a school board, and the school board is appointed entirely by the mayor of Philadelphia. And in the future, it will also be have oversight by the city council members. Mm-hmm. But because they're appointed exclusively by the mayor, and their terms are connected to the mayor's term, if the mayor doesn't win re-election, they don't continue. The next mayor gets to appoint. So more likely than not, I don't think it'll happen currently under this mayor because I don't think he's organized in this way, but I do think in the future there is a possibility that you will have a mayor who will appoint members of the school board, tell them how they should vote on controversial issues, and remove them if they don't vote that way. So you're going to have much more of a direct control over the decisions that are made. So it will make it harder to make unpopular but necessary decisions. So for example, when the School Reform Commission existed, we had to close 30-some schools in Philadelphia because they no longer had enough students in them. When I was on, we closed schools, and to give you an example, it was politically charged to close a school, but one of the schools that we closed, 88% of the families who lived in that neighborhood were sending their children someplace else. That school was a building that could house 2,000 children. It had 200. And so you have to close. It makes no sense to keep the building open. But it was still politically unpopular. It'll be harder, I think, in the future for those decisions to be made.
I have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
One of the things that they've sort of made a big deal about is that they brought on 2 young, students to be part of the board. If I understand correctly, they're not voting members, but they do, in fact, get to weigh in on what affects them directly. So, can you talk a little bit about sort of representation, the representation of the board now, and and then?
So I think in the early days of the School Reform Commission, as you would expect, a number of the people who were appointed had very big profiles in Philadelphia or the state, had very close relationships to the governor and the mayor, and may have been viewed as individuals who had influence, but they also had political interests that I think sometimes made it difficult for them to make the right decisions. I think as you walked 15 years forward, which is around the time I started serving, you ended up having more people who were retired, who used to be in government, who had long histories of public service, and who frankly had no business interests. So as a result, the difficult decisions were a bit easier to have made because the people who were assigned were more civic actors. I think the new school board is the same. I think this new school board, I know many of those members are generally very good people who care a lot about our kids, who have led careers that are very much deep in Philadelphia's, working in Philadelphia nonprofits and with challenges around education. So I think the mayor did a fabulous job in terms of appointing. What's wonderful is having these kids' voices. The way that happened in the past is that the students did serve in a forum with Dr. Height, so he did have a separate board of students. Mm-hmm. This elevates their voice by giving them much more of a public profile. Even if they're not voting, people, and I hope the media will look to them to give a student voice to some of these issues. I also hope that one of the complaints I often had with some of the youth leadership groups that would send students to our board meetings is that they would teach young people leadership purely in the form of protest. If you disagree with what's happening, stand up in the beginning of the meeting, shout your disappointment, insist on demands, leave. And I had a conversation once with one of the leaders about youth, one of these youth programs, and I said, "You're doing a disservice." And to his credit, he agreed, because I said to him, and I challenged him, and he did this, "Next time, your young people certainly come, protest, stand up, express the demands that you want, but then sit and listen to the other students who disagree with you. Because there's always more than one opinion on things. And if you walk away and you're unwilling to sit with that discomfort that comes because somebody else disagrees with you, then you're not a leader. You have to be willing to listen to that." So increasingly, I think having those youth voices will, I hope, balance the energy that young people bring to the conversation, because there will be young people who understand more how the system is challenged and not just how easy it is to make demands.
Y audiencia, una de las razones por las cuales tenemos estas dos maravillosas mujeres aquí es porque una de ellas tiene un libro. El libro es Ink. Eso significa en español tinta, ¿verdad? Tinta. Bueno. Sabrina Burbulias ha sacado este libro y me pego a lo que está diciendo Farah en términos de distintas opiniones. Siempre tenemos distintas opiniones, sobre todo, y cuando dice Farah que pues uno no son líderes reales y no se pueden escuchar esas opiniones y no se pueden llegar a acuerdos. Pues ya todos sabemos que tenemos en este momento, en términos políticos, y no solo en los Estados Unidos, sino en muchísimos lugares de Latinoamérica, tenemos una disrupción, digámoslo, en términos sociales. Hay una división total un poco entre lo que es derecha e izquierda. Los opuestos siempre terminan juntándose, pero tenemos también una gran dificultad de poder escuchar las opiniones del otro. Yo sé que ha generado mucha división todo este tema político en los Estados Unidos, como yo me acuerdo generaba división en mi tierra cuando se hablaba de el presidente Uribe Vélez, que es bastante de ultraderecha, lo definiría yo. Y ya viene Acción de Gracias, que es la época de la familia. No me quiero imaginar las familias peleando, ¿no?, por política y no siendo capaces de juntar. Toda esta historia que estoy hablando es porque Sabrina ha escrito este libro que tiene que ver con el tema de la inmigración.
Sí, es una distopia de inmigración.
Una distopia.
Exactamente.
¿Cómo le traducimos esa palabra a todos nuestros oyentes, el término distopia?
Creo que es un término en español.
Sí, claro. Pero explícanos ese término.
Es una sociedad en la cual la inmigración se ha vuelto un eje para políticas discriminatorias del gobierno, de la administración. Yo me enfoco en individuos, en una comunidad, en las relaciones entre entre gente.
Cuando tú dices yo me enfoco, estás hablando de la historia del libro.
En el libro.
En Ink.
Pero detrás de todo están las políticas que son anti-inmigrantes. Cuando primero se publicó este libro, fue en 2012, diferente editorial, y cuando salió el libro, las críticas fueron buenas, pero mucha gente me decía, ay, esto nunca va a pasar en los Estados Unidos. Desde entonces, los lectores a mí me han mandado mensajes diciendo, uy, mire lo que está pasando, esto me recuerda mucho a Ink. Y una editorial distinta decidió republicar el libro de diferente formato, con diferente portada, con un prefacio de la escritora latina Kathleen Alcalá, porque lo que en 2012 no se podía uno imaginar, en 2018 está sucediendo.
Se lo puede manejar. ¿Qué es eso que está sucediendo? Yo veo aquí, yo veo una marca aquí de como los productos. ¿Qué es lo que pasa allí? ¿Nos van a marcar?
Bueno, en my novel, en el libro, con los emigrantes, y pueden ser ciudadanos, ya sean ciudadanos, trabajadores temporales, sea gente que tenga su estadía aquí legal. A todos los emigrantes, hijos de emigrantes, se les marca con un tatuaje. Pero lo que yo había escrito en 2012, que se propuso durante las primarias de la pasada elección, si se acuerdan que el gobernador de Nueva Jersey, Chris Christie, propuso ponerles GPS trackers a los emigrantes que llegan a los Estados Unidos para poder rastrearlos, como se hace en FedEx o UPS o lo que sea. Y eso es algo que yo ya lo había imaginado en esta distopia del futuro distante y horrible. Y de repente ahí está un político proponiéndolo en nuestro tiempo.
Lo que tú habías puesto en ficción.
Sí, exactamente.
Para.
¿Y qué?
¿Qué piensas de, una pregunta que les tengo a las dos es, ¿qué diferencias reales ven ustedes entre la administración pasada en términos de inmigración y esta administración?
The difference is primarily, I think, in language, because one has to know that under the Obama administration, there was enormous deportation, just as there is today. So it's not as if in practice it was entirely different, but I do think that the language of this administration has created a suggestion that there is a national assault against immigrants. I also think that, to me, the misfortune was, even though Obama talked a lot about wanting to solve immigration, and Trump talks about wanting to solve immigration, but obviously in a different way, it really is a bipartisan issue. I do think that Democrats and Republicans have more that they can agree upon, and that if they wanted to, they could work together to create an environment that was much more hospitable to people who were escaping their homes, refugees, but also to natural immigrants, than they do right now. I think we have made it such a polarized conversation that finding places of agreement serves nobody politically, and which is unfortunate, because then we're not serving people who really need solutions rather than debates. So that's my general sentiment. I guess I'm being a child of immigrant parents, but also my family being from Cuba. My from Cuba, so and I've had family who've been able to do that. So the system at times can really work, but I know and I see how frustrating it is. And I'll just give this one story, and I'll give it to Sabrina. Somebody once said, posted, and I couldn't agree more, that many of us, even the most hardliners, anti-immigrants, who would say we don't want people coming to the U.S. or we're opposed to refugees, would themselves then fight desperately for the one undocumented person they know, who's their friend, their neighbor, who who works for them. Because at the end, people are people, and when you know their struggles personally, they're not just a statistic. And right now, I think a lot of the conversation has made it all about being a statistic as opposed to really understanding that there are people who are struggling, and we have to figure out how to solve for that.
Yeah, como esa parte humana. Sabrina, tú.
Well, look, there are certainly areas in which I agree with you. There's a reason why Obama earned the name Deporter-in-Chief. That being said, there is, a huge difference in the way we talk about immigrants. There is a dehumanization that has gotten so rampant that it's all you need to look at are comment sections on articles about immigration where people can't even muster enough humanity to be appalled by the separation of children and parents at the border. Or the fact that these children their parents have been deported and they are essentially lost in the system now. This is, it's horrific, the level at which we have escalated the language. And this has real world, it's not insignificant. This has real world consequences. When I have interviewed undocumented immigrants who have spanned both the Obama and Trump administrations, and asked them, have things gotten worse? And they're like, look, they were never great. There was always fear of raids or deportation. The fear is quite different now, and it's as if somebody has given everybody permission. It struck me that they told me they've never, in particular, one young woman with children who is requesting asylum from Honduras, who told me, I've never been called an animal as many times as I have since the president used that to describe us. When you characterize people as animals and criminals, and you're going to send the military to turn back caravans, you thwart the asylum process, change the way we accord asylum. When you start talking about cutting visas for legal immigration, when you start talking about checking that naturalized citizens haven't made some sort of administrative mistake on their paperwork or lied, one or the other, doesn't matter, to strip them of citizenship, we're like leagues above where we were when Obama was being called by us Deporters-in-Chief. I mean, it's just escalated to a point where it is truly a human rights issue. And to a certain extent, actually, I want to tell you that one of the things that has struck me over the years, and one of the reasons I made one of the characters that people love best in this, Cuban, is that the Cuban American experience of immigration is
Totally
completely
different.
different.
Yeah.
And so, as I've been covering immigration and being part of the immigration movement, I've seen very few Cuban Americans in, sort of working toward that. So I made one of my crux characters very engaged in sort of resisting the dystopia, a Cuban American, because I am convinced that I grew up in Guatemala. My mother was Guatemalan. I grew up at the time of the undeclared civil war that took place during those 36 years. And what I learned from that was that you start by, sort of like repressing a small, group of people that you think, are dangerous or this or that, whatever the excuse is, and it just widens and widens and widens. And the circle eventually encompasses anybody who is not sort of in the inner circle or in the know. And I really feel like we've come to the point where anti-immigrant also means anti-Latino, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're Cuban or Colombian or Guatemalan. The minute you self-identify as an immigrant, or the child of immigrants, it puts you in second class, sort of.
So it's interesting. So I had, I think you're absolutely right, and I know you're absolutely right. The Cuban immigration experience is entirely different, and I've always known that because of the way my parents would talk about their story, and knowing that the way they would talk about it is the U.S. opened its arms to them. Very, very different experience. What I will say is the opportunity, I think, is to figure out how do we have that conversation about immigration in a different way. As I said earlier, I do believe it is a bipartisan issue. I do believe both parties want to solve for it. I think what it's become is it's become a political ploy that's used to create categories of people who can be moved to vote in one way or another. And so so the immigration narrative, even though many of our legal immigrants are actually Canadians or Australians or Brits, not necessarily Latinos, even though a disproportionate number of our immigrants are of diverse countries, it does become a political conversation around Latinos. And because Latinos can be organized to move, I think, ultimately a Democrat agenda. So, yes, Obama was called a deporter in chief, but it didn't get the headlines that we have right now. And I think there's a reason for that, because I think there wasn't a political, it becomes, how do you organize politically against the person that you like, right? And so if you like Obama, if you believe the Latino vote should go to Obama, your Latino leaders aren't going to move aggressively to making this a robust national headline. In the same way that you can for a guy, admittedly so, with Trump's behavior about Latinos, you could see why you could animate people to be not just anti-Trump, but anti-Republican, and animate them to go vote for Democrats. I think we need to figure out how we have this conversation so that Latinos are challenging both Democrats and Republicans to get to a bargaining table and get to solutions rather than just use us as political ploys.
Farah, tú estás hablando ahorita anti-republicano, anti-Trump. ¿Tú crees que, yo diría usted, no diría tutear, pero bueno, estamos entre
nos, se puede
colegas, estamos, bueno. ¿Tú crees que esta exacerbación del idioma, del uso de las palabras, y tú lo dices, hay que aprender a hablar de este tema, ¿tú crees que la exacerbación del idioma en palabras tan agresivas como decir que los mexicanos son drug dealers y violadores, que además cuando dice mexicano está diciendo todos los latinos,
Bueno, agregó Latinoamérica después. Primero empezó con los mexicanos y después agregó Latinoamérica.
¿Tú crees que eso ha generado entre los republicanos algún rechazo y se han vuelto algunos republicanos anti-Trump? Como que ha dividido el partido, ¿tú crees?
It's more complicated than that. I don't think it's about. So when I worked I worked a presidential campaign. I was a supporter of Carly Fiorina, who was running for the Republican nomination early on. I worked for her in New Hampshire. I served as a surrogate. I also canvassed. And when I was out and knocking on doors, a number of people would say, "Oh, I love Carly." But I think she'd make a great vice president, which always infuriated me because she's a woman. I think everyone just assumed she'd be a great vice president. But then people would tell us that they were debating. This is New Hampshire. You can vote across party lines. They were either going to side between Trump or Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
And the argument they would make, even if they ultimately were supporting Trump, is he's not presidential, but he'll figure it out. And it was this moment where I realized that people were so upset that they didn't care what would come out of his mouth. They just wanted somebody who would change things and fix things. And so many of my friends who did vote for Trump would say that they voted for him because they didn't like the other option, and because they cared about who would be in the Supreme Court. And it wasn't because they voted for Trump. They voted for a Supreme Court justice and anti-Hillary. So that just gives you, so in many ways they just decided to ignore the language. So that's why you see Republicans kind of in this confused state, because the head of the Republican Party may be doing things that please them, but is certainly not communicating in a way that's pleasing to Republicans. It doesn't serve them. And so that's a problem, but it's the place where Republican politics is right now. It also doesn't serve you as a politician to be strongly anti-Trump, because it's almost like I can curse my mother, but don't you dare. So I think many Republicans feel like if I'm going to be called all kinds of names, deplorable, sexist, misogynist, whatever those things are that come with having voted for Trump, then I'm going to defend him to my dying day, because when you assault him, you're assaulting me with your language. That's why I hate the place we're in right now, because we're not having real conversations. Too often we're just pointing fingers.
Do you think the people who vote because of the Supreme Court are happy or satisfied?
Thrilled. Oh, absolutely thrilled. I mean, they got the never would they have thought that they would have had two Supreme Court justices that would get seated. But certainly the concern was whether or not they would be able to get Gorsuch on, like somebody else on, to start turning. At the time, it was really just thinking about balancing the court out. Now, it's obviously have shifted the court to, you never know, ultimately. People think to more conservative position, but maybe, who knows, maybe it's just more centrist position. But that was, the fear was that there'd be another Democrat, and Hillary would be less the centrist Hillary that people remember and more the left-leaning Hillary, and she would appoint people who would really turn the country in a different direction. It's the nature of our country. We go back and forth in our politics because ultimately most Americans are more moderate. Just like I think this election is going to turn the House, and it'll become a Democrat House because Americans want balance as much as we can get.
Oh, so that's your prediction. Porque pensaba preguntar al final cuál sería la predicción.
I think the House will turn blue and the Senate will remain Republican.
Quiero volver al libro, Sabrina. ¿Cuáles son los personajes que hay en el libro?
There are 4.
Okay.
First-person narrators. But there are 2 non-first-person narrators who are consistently, they're very big parts of it, and they're consistently people's favorite. There is among the first-person narrators, there's a journalist named Finn. He's Anglo, white. He really comes into this sort of the world that is created via journalism. He covers the group of people who become known as inks, because they have a tattoo. So, and he covers them from the moment the National Identity Bill passes, and then all of the escalation into English only, and detention centers, and a whole series of other horrific policies that are put in place. So that's initially his entree. His brother-in-law, who is mixed race, and but not inked. He's Anglo enough. He's removed enough from any immigrant background that he doesn't get inked. Is a contractor and an artist, and he gets involved with the Cuban American protagonist, whose name is Meche, who is a chemist and is somebody of means, and her resistance takes a form that really fits her profession and her sort of status, and the privilege that accords her. And then there's a character, Mari, who is the first character who really she was the first character born. She was born in Guatemala. Her mother's indigenous. Her father was an American Peace Corps worker. And she's brought to the United States by her father then. And she is a citizen, but as she's tattooed, obviously, because even citizens are tattooed, depending on their background. And as the book progresses, she loses more and more civil rights. And the fourth character, first-person character, is a teenager. She's half Native American, Mohawk, but completely culturally living with her white mother, culturally very white. She's a teenager. Her mother runs one of the detention centers. And she actually becomes involved with the second, not point of view character, but very big character who is very popular, Toño, who is Mexican, a citizen, and definitely one of the sort of the bad boy, let's resist that in big ways. So they all intersect, and each of them you can see where, as the dystopia progresses, the choices they make in terms of resisting it. Some of the resistances are they're not showy. I mean, I think this is true to the way we as human beings are. We're not, if we look at eras in which there have been repressive societies or administrations in different countries, we don't all become resistance fighters and strap on a gun and go, no, we don't. We don't become partisans necessarily that take up arms. And for somebody who grew up in a country that was at war with itself, I can tell you it's almost never, it's never my instinct to go to a military or sort of guerrilla response to things. On the other hand, what the book shows is the many ways ordinary people resist and can resist, and ultimately, in the book, the community, the sense of community is the hero. The intentional communities that are formed, the communities that resist the repression.
Can I ask you a question, Sabina?
Sure.
So I think what's interesting about how you've laid that out is that you had to make decisions as to the difference between someone's genetics and their identity, and particularly when you mentioned the Native American, right? There's a difference around your experience, but there's also can be your genetics. And I talk about it often when people will call me African American. I say I'm not African American. I'm black. I have a black experience in the U.S. I do not have an African American experience. It's very different. But I do have a Latina experience. Like that is my culture, my generation. It's my food, my dance, my language, right? And so that my experience in the U.S. is very much as a Latina. So I'm curious as to how you made a determination as to what makes someone who they are. And I think about it all in the context of this narrative now with Senator Elizabeth Warren, who I felt like tried to claim, poorly so, an identity that she never really lived. Like that it might be her genetics, but she never had that experience. I would never be so bold as to do that. And so I'm curious as to what your take is on that, based on how you had to make decisions here about how people would be characterized.
I think, you know, it's not only my take. I mean, I think the more removed you are from the immigrant experience, the less likely you are to identify as an immigrant, and the less likely you are to be identified as an immigrant. So, you know, you're the daughter of immigrants. I'm the daughter of an immigrant. I additionally have the immigrant experience because I didn't live in the United States. You know, I came here when I was 15. But my daughter doesn't necessarily, she's very attuned to immigrant issues because she's my daughter after all. But she doesn't necessarily identify in the same way. And I think there's a difference between identity and cultural identity and heritage. And I think that's one of the things that makes it possible for people who are Irish or Polish, have ancestry, people like Joey Bento, for example, to put up, who clearly, you know, it's been written, had you know, immediate family that didn't speak English that well. You know, it empowers them to feel like they can put up, you know, this is America, speak English, in his place of business. When we know that there were plenty of Italian and Polish grandmothers out there who didn't speak English, or who spoke few words of English. I think, you know, the more removed you are from the immigrant experience, the more likely you are to sort of just identify as sort of culturally American without defining what that is. But it was really important for me to make sure that one of the things that I have perceived now that I wanted to imbue the dystopia with is the sense that no matter how assimilated or acculturated or American you feel, the perception of your Americanness doesn't come from you. It's externally, it is really externally imposed. So for example, my daughter, who, look, I married an Anglo-white guy from central New York State. She's very pale. She, you know, she understands Spanish, doesn't speak it. You know, she does not fit any of the stereotypic, you know, ideas of what we have as somebody who is, you know,
and she's third
Latina.
generation.
Right. She thinks of herself as American. She was in school. This was when she was in, I can't remember if it was middle school or elementary school. Elementary, I think. They did some project about, you know, family sort of genetics and history. And of course, you know, she had a lot of information about the Guatemalan side of the family and, you know, and the Mexican and all of this. And at the end of her, and of course, you know, my father's family is Greek and Greek American, and so she had that. At the end of this, one of her little classmates, you know, started calling her illegal as a taunt. You know, in no way in no way is that something that my daughter would ever consider herself, because obviously, you know, her status as a citizen is not in any, you know, is not in question. It's not in flux. But this was externally applied, and I find it very frequently is true of people who approach Latinos. You have an accent, they're going to assume you're foreign. You know, you can grow up in North Philly speaking mostly Spanish, and you can have an accent in your English. And be, you know, you can be from Puerto Rico and a citizen of the United States, and people are
y probablemente no hable inglés.
Exactamente, and people are going to treat you as if somehow you're foreign, and anything you do is viewed through that filter. A lot of times when people argue with me about immigration, the first thing they'll bring up as one of the irritants about immigration is that they have to choose whether they want to hear, you know, the automated message on their phone in English or in Spanish, as if speaking Spanish accords, you know, illegal status to you. So I think, you know, one of the things that this book plays with is when that becomes codified. And I think this is one of the reasons that people like me look at what's happening under this administration and say, oh, you're codifying all of this stuff, these perceptions. If you're naturalized, you're not the same as an you know, native-born citizen, right? Your application is going to be gone over with a fine-tooth comb. If you're Latino, you know, you're assumed to be an immigrant. How many Latinos are in this administration's power, you know, positions of power? Not one anywhere. If you're Latino, you know, you can be a successful Latino like Carlos Slim and still be slimed by this administration. There is a concerted, you can go to Puerto Rico after a hurricane and treat the people of Puerto Rico as if, you know, they're second-class citizens, and throw paper towels at them instead of seriously addressing the issue of a natural disaster and what it's done to a part of, you know, to citizens of the United States. I think all of this gets codified. And then it doesn't matter what you think of yourself. It doesn't matter that you think of yourself. It doesn't matter that I've been a citizen my entire life, right? It doesn't matter that you're a citizen. You're a naturalized citizen, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you're the daughter of immigrants. Because, you know, it's become codified that somehow Latinidad is suspect. And I'm not saying it's limited to Latinos, although it tends to be immigration is very closely identified with Latinos. But talk to Asian people who have been here, Asian Americans who have been here, who get asked, where are you from? And, you know, and this is codified, you know, like, you know, people assume foreignness. Or speak to, you know, black immigrants. As you said, a very different experience than the African American experience. But, you know, you have an accent, you're automatically, you know, cast into this weird sort of like code for, you know, suspects.
Amigas, familia, estamos en ParaTiMujer, estamos con Farah Jiménez, de CEO de Education, Philadelphia Education Fund, y estamos con Sabrina Burbulias, periodista independiente que ha republicado su libro Inc., que es un tema bastante particular y actual, que es el tema de la inmigración y la inmigración latina, pues en los caracteres que ya tiene en su libro. Quisiera pasar a un tema, entonces, para ir cerrando y acercándonos al final del programa, y es que ya se acercan las elecciones y parece que los jóvenes han sido uno de los grupos que quieren votar realmente, incluso todo este movimiento después de la matanza en Florida, que sacó este grupo de jóvenes que están peleando contra la Asociación Nacional del Rifle, para que haya una normatividad más, digámoslo, ¿cómo calificarlo? Una normatividad más clara, si yo pudiera usar ese término, en términos del uso de las armas. Pero los jóvenes han sido uno de los grupos que se están movilizando. Ahora hay otros grupos puertorriqueños que cuando vienen después del huracán María, vienen a ciudades como Filadelfia, en este caso ya tienen otra posibilidad de votar, una mayor aceptación de su voto, digámoslo, en otros niveles, aquí ya pisando tierra norteamericana. Pero el sistema es como complejo, es un sistema difícil, el sistema de votación de los Estados Unidos he conversado con muchos latinos que lo sienten complejo, ¿no? Hay unas primarias, hay que entonces votar por gobernador, lieutenant governor, state representative, senate para el país en general, y en general como que no se entiende, y uno de los jóvenes decía que debería haber clases en las escuelas, que debería haber más enseñanza al respecto. Y como tengo aquí una persona profundamente sabia en términos de educación, ¿cómo acercar la educación y la política para tener decisiones muchísimo más, no importa cuál es la decisión, pero decisiones mucho más elaboradas en términos de a quién elegimos, para ver si nos gusta la migración, no solo latina, pero para ver si nos gusta usar las armas o no, para ver si nos gusta el medio ambiente y cómo quedamos en el medio ambiente. ¿Cómo hacer esa interacción?
The problem is that there is no longer a civics education in our schools in Philadelphia, and frankly nationally, it's one of the things that's missing. So while we may have classes in political science or have students organize conversations around themes like Second Amendment, it doesn't mean that we're teaching kids the most basic things about civics. So that means, how does city government work? How is it different than state government? What is a state constitution? What is a U.S. constitution? How do you vote? What's the primary elections versus a general election? So many of our young people don't understand the most basics of politics. I always wonder and reflect as to why I grew up to be a 100% voter, one of those people who never misses an election.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because my parents came from Cuba, and for many years they didn't get to vote.
Yeah.
So when they became citizens, it was the very first thing that they got very involved in, making sure that they vote every single time. My grandfather, before he died, went to the polls at 100. So there's this consistent idea that it is a great honor and a privilege that you live in a country where you get to decide who represents you. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but 4 years, 2 years, 6 years, you'll get to revisit that election and vote somebody else in. So that's the unfortunate thing, is that we don't really have that conversation with young people. I also think, to my earlier point, is that we need to teach young people to sit with discomfort when they have to listen to other people who have a different opinion. Just as there were these Parkland, Florida students who became very prominent with their anti-Second Amendment dialogue, there were other students who got very little attention, who maintained their interest and support of the Second Amendment despite the shooting. But we didn't create kind of a balanced platform for those two narratives to coexist. So the challenge, I think, is how do you allow students to be able to hear both sides of an issue in a school setting, as opposed to necessarily getting all of their news in kind of one.
Pero Farah, bueno, y es que yo vengo de un país que vivió y que todavía, pero vivió 50 años de violencia. Yo tengo 52, entonces pues yo soy profundamente hija de la violencia. ¿Cómo sentarnos y cuando somos tan jóvenes, cómo sentarnos a poder y poder dialogar en esta posibilidad despite the violence, poder dialogar acerca de la posibilidad de las armas cuando se es tan joven y cuando me han matado a mis amigos.
Because the reason the Constitution exists, I should say that the Bill of Rights, what's really important about the Bill of Rights is it challenges us as people when to protect certain rights even when we're angry about somebody exercising that right. So I can be really angry at someone exercising their First Amendment right to call me a name, to print things about me in the paper that might be allegations, or to, assuming I'm a public figure, right, and that's happened to me. I can be really angry about the way someone talks to me, but it doesn't mean that they're not allowed to say it. And I'll never forget, I once had a conversation with a former colleague of mine. Somebody had written something, I don't even remember what it was, in the local paper, an opinion column, and she so disagreed with his position, says he should not be allowed to write that. I said, no, that's exactly what he should be allowed to write, and you should be allowed to write a response. So if you're really angry about it, you get to write a response saying you think what he wrote is vulgar and disgusting. That's the beauty of this country. You know, my parents left a country where you can't say things. I tell the story often of my husband asking my cousin when we went to Cuba to visit my family, how do you feel about all the Cubans who leave to go play in the U.S. Major League Baseball? And he said, it's no big deal, nobody cares. We have a lot of talented baseball players in Cuba. And then later my cousin took me aside and said, my husband is lying, and he told me to apologize to you, but your van driver was there and he doesn't know him, so he didn't feel like he could say what he really believed because he was fearful that he would be called up for his opinion. So when you have that as a contrast, you realize how important that value is. And when you have as a contrast, for us being Cuban, where your government rose up against the people, you understand why there are people who embrace the Second Amendment as much as they do. Because there are people who can believe that the government could rise up against them, and they need to have the ability to protect themselves and bear arms. And so that's the beauty of those amendments, is that they're meant to challenge us. When we most want someone else to not have a right, it challenges us to recognize at one point, I may want that right too.
Sabrina.
I think, it's even, in some ways, I think, the way we reach young people is even more fundamental than that. I mean, it was interesting to me to go to the polling place with my daughter, who's college educated, for her first vote. And she was, she's really educated. She had, definitely knew who she was voting for. And just the mechanics of voting were nerve-wracking. It was like, can you come with me? All of these things we don't know. Our young people don't necessarily know. They don't know the experience of it. And in certain neighborhoods, we absolutely know that people take advantage of that.
Oh, yeah.
So, for me it starts with, I'm surprised because when I came here to the U.S., I did high school here. And in those days, of course, there were civics classes, but there were also, before the elections, there were mock elections. So that you sort of had the experience of going and doing it. It wasn't the same, but I really feel that so many young people are disenfranchised, not because the issues are unimportant to them. Though they're really important, and they discuss among themselves and on social media in depth about those. It's going from discussion and theory to practical, and nobody wants to feel stupid or like they don't know or unsure. And I think there's a part of voting in which we make that decision for others by the way we structure our polling places, by how we don't make them sort of user friendly for people. And we don't. I think we need to revisit the day. Tuesdays. Why Tuesdays and not weekends?
Well, those
I think we need to.
Domingo.
I think we need to make
En Latinoamérica votamos los domingos.
Election days should be, in my humble opinion, legal. It should be a holiday. So employers should, make sure to
Hay
allow.
tiempo para ir a votar.
That's right.
Hay personas que tienen 3 empleos y que no pueden ir a votar porque no pueden faltar a su
Exactamente.
empleo.
Y las escuelas deberían dejar que los estudiantes no tengan que ir a clase. Por lo general, donde yo vivo, cierran las escuelas porque allí es donde son las
Donde
urnas.
se vota, claro.
Pero en las universidades, todo, si hicieran que la votación fuera más fácil, votarían más
Votaría
personas.
más gente, claro. Y sería más un proceso más democrático, o sea, más personas definiendo quién es.
Well, I just want to say one thing, because you made me think of how when I grew up too, we did little elections in the school. We learned how to use the machine, and
Sí.
I think you're absolutely right. We do have an office in Philadelphia where we elect the city commissioners, and the job of the city commissioners is to run our elections and the voting process. And so they do run occasionally field exercises in communities where they show how to vote, and they encourage people to register to vote. And so maybe one of the bipartisan things we can do is all encourage our city commissioners to go into communities where you're seeing more disenfranchisement, so that you're making it a little less nerve-wracking for people to vote.
Más común, más abrazar
right,
más a la gente en el
right.
proceso democrático.
Y decirles, sí puede, you can have somebody help you, but it can't be somebody,
Claro,
this
claro,
person or
right.
that person.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really imperative.
Sí. Bueno, además de que yo he visto las máquinas de votación en inglés y en español, y a veces en español las preguntas, por ejemplo, que se agregan a la votación no tienen ningún sentido. O sea, la traducción es pésima. Entonces es muy difícil realmente, de hecho que es difícil para muchas personas esto de estar en la máquina, de ver dónde es que se espicha el botón. Además la pregunta, ¿qué está diciendo ahí en español, no? Bueno, yo quiero ir cerrando, quiero agradecerle a todas las personas que se conectaron, a Ángel Medina, Jenny Toro, a Ángeles Durante, tengo aquí 2 personas. Quiero agradecerle a Farah por sus comentarios. Yo sé que no es fácil publicar, más ser una latina periodista, no es fácil publicar. Desafortunadamente ya se nos acaba el tiempo. Quiero que ellas se despidan como quieran.
Gracias por la invitación. Sí, deben de votar este noviembre.
Sí, muchísimas gracias, Emma. Siempre es un gusto hablar contigo y con Farah. Sí, hay que recalcar, no solo voten ustedes, pero asegúrense que sus hijos y sus padres también voten.
Ya, y el vecino y todo el mundo.
Todo el mundo.
Amigos, nos vemos el próximo sábado. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros y que tengan una semana bien bella.